Welcome back, everybody. It's your boy Sean, the American in Krakow, back in the studio about to do another one of these reaction videos. So today we're checking out a video that a couple of you and some friends of mine have specifically asked me to react to. I didn't necessarily want to do it just because I'm not necessarily a fan of this person's music, but at the same time, I don't know if I've listened to enough of his music to honestly say I've given him a fair shake. So we're going to be checking out Tom MacDonald's Fake Woke today. Let's get it.
I think it's crazy I'm the one who they labeled as controversial, and Cardi B is the role model for 12-year-old girls. There's rappers pushing Xanax at the top of the billboard, but if I mention race in a song, I'm scared I'll get killed for it. It's backwards, it's getting exponentially dumb. It's more difficult to get a job than purchase a gun. Eminem used to gay bash and murder his mom, and now he doesn't want fans if they voted for Trump. We're ashamed to be American. You should probably love it because you have the right to hate it and not get...
Hold on. He said a lot. We are 28 seconds into this video, and he has said way too much already. Cardi B being an example for 12-year-old girls. No disrespect to Cardi B or to Meg Thee Stallion or to Nicki Minaj or any of these women out there that are producing music, producing art, and really doing what they need to do, right? That's their business and they're getting their dollar. So props to them, respect to them. But at the same time, I really can't see how having minors listen to that music and have them think that that's appropriate and that's appropriate behavior for just to be in existence in society is good for anyone. I'm a TikTok guy. I'm on TikTok. I haven't been posting in a long time, so I don't do that so much anymore. But I still check it out. I follow and see and have people that I do follow on TikTok and you see what's on trend, and some of it is extremely inappropriate. And it's because of the way the music is portrayed in society today and the way that the lyrics are being absorbed and what is becoming popular. And that's unfortunate. He also says something about it's harder to get a job than a gun. He's clearly speaking of the US there, right? Because I don't think there's any country in the world where it's as easy to get a gun, aside from where you're issued one. Switzerland and other places, but I don't necessarily know if that's true. Is it easy in some places to get a gun? Absolutely. Is it harder in certain places to get a gun? Yeah, it's hard. But that's an important thing to say, right? It should never be easier to get a gun than get a job. But, we are where we are today in society. Another thing he talks about is, rappers talking about Valium or drugs in general, and then getting pushed to the top of the billboards versus, and he's saying, but he talks about race and he's afraid of being killed. I guess in today's temperature of the U.S., talking about race is a hot topic anyway. Regardless of you being a rapper or not, you can easily find yourself being open to threats from opposite sides of the race fence there, depending on what you say. And that's kind of unfortunate, but at the same time, that's where we are in the world today. But, but that drug thing, that's a big one. Because, I look at rappers who talk or make music around fast money and drugs and cars, lifestyle, and put it on a hot beat, and those things do pop. And then you have rappers who put out actual lyrical content and say something, and they don't necessarily trend or they don't go as far or as deep in the record sales as the more popular things. And then you see at the same time, you see artists, you had, Juice WRLD and no, not Pop Smoke because he was killed, but, just Juice WRLD is the first one that really honestly pops in my head as an amazing, talented artist. That man, his freestyles, that dude could go forever, and his personality, his just kind of that vibe he gave, was so chilled and so cool. But he spoke about drugs all the time and his use of drugs all the time, and in the end, unfortunately, it's not necessarily that active use of drugs, but his involvement with drugs ended up what he lost his life over, and it's unfortunate, and that's the popular trend, and that's the popular music, and that's just Tom MacDonald saying a good thing right there. It shouldn't necessarily be popularized to be the Cardi B or be the rapper who's just rapping about drugs and money and being that's what's the most popular thing. It shouldn't necessarily be that way.
Eminem used to gay bash and murder his mom, and now he doesn't want fans if they voted for Trump. We're ashamed to be American. You should probably love it, because you
Aren't
have
you
the right to
Canadian?
hate it and not get stoned to death in public. As children, we were taught how to walk and talk, but the system wants adults to sit down and shut up. Cancel culture runs the world now, the planet went crazy. Label everything we say as homophobic or racist. If you're white, then you're privileged, guilty by association. All our childhood heroes got Me Too'd or they're rapists.
Okay, Eminem did make a statement. I think it was during a BET freestyle or a BET cipher. I think it was a freestyle, it was considered, about, he's drawing a line in the sand or something like that. And if you support Trump, he doesn't want you as a fan. I think he's come out after that and spoken about that. And necessarily, he kind of pulled that back a little bit. But at the same time, as an artist, is that not something he can say? I dislike this, and if you support that, I don't necessarily want you supporting me. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. I guess I could liken that to, I dislike genocide. And if you support genocide, I don't want you to support me. It seems really absurd and a silly thing to say, but at the same time, it's my opinion. I dislike something. I mean, I pick genocide because I don't know too many people besides maniacs that would say they support genocide. I think. I haven't really thought that one through, I guess. But, if I don't like something and you do, maybe it's too different of a topic for us to have a conversation about and support each other. So I was like, you know what, let's not deal with each other. I don't know if that's such a terrible thing. It's a harsh thing to say, and maybe the way he said it was kind of messed up, but, he did say it, and I think he tried to walk it back after that. Also, being told, I should love America, but I was raised to be, told what to do and how to, to walk strong or something like that, and now they just want me to sit down and shut up. I don't get it, right? Like, it almost sounds like the same things. I'm being raised on how to walk and talk, and then as an adult, they're telling me to sit down and shut up. Yeah, I get it. It's if they're raising me on how to walk and talk, they're raising me how to walk and talk the way they want me to. And now, if I walk and talk not the way they want me to, they want me to sit down and shut up. So that point seems stupid. Maybe I'm misunderstanding it, but I think he said they raised us teaching us how to walk and talk, but now as an adult, they want us to sit down and shut up or something like that. And yeah, no shit. They teach me to walk and talk the way they want me to. I'm from the generation where I was still saying a pledge of allegiance to the flag every morning at school. Stand up, hand on heart, pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. All of that. I can still say it. It seems weird now, but yeah, while I was saying that, that's what they wanted me to say. Now, if I said something different, yeah, they want me to sit down and shut up because it doesn't support their agenda. So I don't see the point that he's making there. It seems like a bad point, Tom. I think you missed that one.
runs the world now, the planet went crazy. Label everything we say as homophobic or racist. If you're white, then you're privileged, guilty by association. All our childhood heroes got Me Too'd or they're rapists. They never freed the slaves. They realized that they don't need to change. They gave us tiny screens, we think we free because we can't see the cage. They knew that race war would be the game they need to play. For people to big teams, they used the media to feed the flame.
Slavery never ended. They just transformed it to small screens, social media. I guess that small screens is the representation. I'm looking at Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is I'm looking at on my phone. So small screens, the internet basically. And slavery has never ended. They just changed the way they control us. I don't know where I sit with that one personally, because this entire video, in my opinion, he's talked about cancel culture has taken over the world or something like that, but everything he's talking about here is very U.S. centric, very U.S. focused. And that makes a difference. And the reason I say that is the word slavery is it's a global term, right? Slavery happened all over the world at different times in history, in different parts of the world at different times. But how slavery was implemented and done has been different as well, depending on time and place. And slavery in the U.S., in my opinion, was different or very unique in the sense of how it was done. Like, you can be captured and made a slave, and then all the generations following you were going to inherently be born into slavery. And I don't know if it was necessarily implemented like that everywhere. I think that's I'd have to do a lot more research, but in my understanding is the way slavery was done in the U.S. is different than it was in a lot of other places. And in this case, using that concept, a very U.S. focused concept, not the global concept or general term of slavery, I don't necessarily think that equating controlling the masses via social media or via information flow is even remotely comparable to American slavery, right? There's no threat of a physical abuse and death, and there's no way that you can escape this. The whole concept of this is fake woke, but that means there's a real woke, and real woke means awake from the society, the false image or the false control that is put upon you, and you are awake and you're outside of that now, and you can see the world for what it is. So if that's possible, you can't say it's the same as slavery, because that slavery that we're talking about, that the U.S. was built on, that there was no hope of waking up from that. Yes, it eventually stopped, but there was no thought of that eventually in the minds of the people who were slaves at that time. I can determine today whether I want to believe something or not. I didn't have that freedom then. Not I, but a slave. So I don't think this is a fair comparison either. It's a good statement that we are being controlled. It is a form of generalized slavery, if you want to use it as that term. But because this song is so American U.S. focused, and when you say slavery, I hear American slavery, the plantations and backbone of America, building the infrastructure, that thing, and they're not comparable in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. Sorry.
They realized that they don't need to change. They gave us tiny screens, we think we free because we can't see the cage. They knew that race war would be the game they need to play. For people to big teams, they used the media to feed the flame.
That's fair.
They so fake woke. Facts don't care about feelings. They know
facts don't care.
They won't tell me what to believe in. They so fake woke. Same old safe zones. They so fake woke. Facts crazy how these people screaming facts, but they fake woke. Hate their neighbor cause he wears a mask or he stays home. Has a daughter but his favorite artist said he slays hoes. Picks her up from school, music slaps on the way home. Censorship's an issue cause they choose what they erase. There's a difference between hate speech and speech that you hate. I think Black Lives Matter was the stupidest name when the system's screwing everyone exactly the same.
All right. Listening to music, necessarily music that, paints women in a certain way while having your daughter in the back seat. It's kind of like the same thing about Cardi B being a role model for 13-year-olds, right? So covered that topic. We already agreed that was not necessarily a good thing. Censorship, and then there being a difference between hate speech and speech that you hate. True. That's very true. That's a very, very powerful statement, very accurate statement. But then I can't help but feel, and I guess I would have to see when this song was released exactly, but I can't help but feel that this is a specific call out about Trump's censorship on Twitter, right? His Twitter ban. And not just Trump, but like other people around the same time being censored for making false statements or for claiming certain things, and then that becoming used for inciting other issues. Censorship is a tough one, right? That is a tough concept, because in theory you should say nothing should be censored and all information should be available to everyone for them to review and perform an analysis on. I agree in the perfect world. However, when you have a situation where if two pieces of information are provided and you can prove one piece is false and the other one is accurate, like sit there and prove it, show facts, show support, show all the information needed, and then people still choose to believe the false fact or the false piece of information and then push it upon others as fact and have other people pick that up as fact and then use that false fact to incite violence or to stir up a political situation or a racial situation. So, I think he made a statement of, we're afraid of today because the media labels everything. I'm missing some points or paraphrasing, but it's either racism or shit. What did he say? Homophobia. I think that's what he said. The label, the cancel culture, the cultures labels everything you say as racism or homophobia. You get categorized by that, and that's a really tough thing, right? Because if everything I'm saying is, or if what I'm saying is false, and then that false topic is then used to incite acts of racism, should that be censored? I would think so, but maybe not, right? Like, I'm not an expert in this area or a genius, but I can tell. Like, I had a conversation with a woman who worked for me a while ago. I was living in Chicago at the time, and this woman, older than me by probably a few years, we were having a conversation. Somehow the conversation steered to race or racism. And this had to be back in 2017, I would say. 2016, 2017 was probably the year. And at some point the conversation turned to me saying, hey, it's a weird time because I don't recall there ever being a time in my life at that point where it was cool to be racist. And she was like, what do you mean? It's not cool to be a racist. I'm like, in theory, it's not cool to be a racist. You're right. But the reality is in the 80s and in the 90s, if I even gave off a general hint of being racist in public, public put me in check. The public was like, that's unacceptable. You can't do that. That's inappropriate to say those things because they're racist. At that time, so that was in 2000, it was 2017. Actually, I remember the year. It was 2017. Summer. It was in the summer of 2017. At that point already, it was just from the year or so, maybe 2 years I was living back in the US at that point, that it was clear that people were either becoming more comfortable with racist statements and racist activities happening in public and not reacting. But it was very clear that the public was not reacting the same way they did in the 90s or even the early 2000s. Shit. And it was almost acceptable to be racist. And now I don't think anybody accepted it. It was almost like people were afraid to speak out against it is what really happened. They were afraid to step up and say, hey, you can't say that anymore, because they were afraid of being labeled something else or canceled, I guess is what was happening. But because of that fear, it allowed it to spread. And what is that statement? All it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing. And I don't mean man as in men, male thing. It's a statement. All it takes for evil to succeed is for good men to do nothing, or something like that. And that's what happened. I saw it. I felt it. I felt that people could say things and make statements about me living in a suburb outside of Chicago about me not being white, and it was acceptable in certain situations, or it was okay, whereas normally people would speak up and say, you can't say that. Or it was so uncomfortable to say that they wouldn't even publicly say it. And now they were so comfortable to even think it that they were comfortable to say it and without any repercussion or many repercussions. So it was just a weird thing. And that's, that has been happening. And so I don't think you're just being blatantly labeled as homophobic or racist. What I think happened was, this acceptance of it, it got to a certain point where there was a balance maybe, and it went way out of balance. It started to lean a little bit out of balance, where it was becoming publicly acceptable or okay to, or people were afraid to speak out about it. And then the correction happened. Like there was a kind of, this period is like the correction. They're trying to correct it. And when you try to correct, you tend to overcorrect. So what happened was you had a balance, you had a center point, it leaned a little bit one way or the other. The culture kind of caught on, like, whoa, that's not right. We need to be back in the balance, and overcorrected. And now anything you say can potentially be racist or homophobic, and that's unfortunate. But eventually, hopefully, things will kind of find their way back to a balance at some point. Anyway, back to the song. I'm rambling.
Censorship's an issue because they choose what they erase. There's a difference between hate speech and speech that you hate.
Yep,
I think Black Lives Matter was the stupidest name when the system's screwing everyone exactly the same.
False. The system is not screwing everybody exactly the same. And the stats will prove it. Stats prove that. Arrests, incarcerations in the US, not equal. Ownership of homes, property, not equal. Job disparity, types of jobs, not equal. Pay salaries, not equal. Are people on both sides or of all sides being screwed in one area or another? Absolutely. Unless you're the corporate owner, you're a corporation, you're already a big company with money to invest in lobbying and things like that, odds are you're going to get screwed one way or another. But the severity of how you get screwed are not the same. Some people get really, really screwed and some people don't. And that's not necessarily just a race thing, but race is one of those things where it's not the same. And while Black Lives Matter as a name might rub some people really wrong, and that causes some friction for people, at the same time, that friction is maybe what the intent was with the name. because it forces you to stop and have a discussion, potentially. My mother had this argument with me. It's like, oh, all lives matter. Yes, Mom, all lives should matter, and all lives should matter the same. And that's the problem. All lives don't matter the same. And that's the point of the BLM statement, which is, sure, there's violence against other races, but is it, if you do the math by population, is it equal, or is there really an outlier here? And I think the point that they're trying to make is the way Black lives are treated by, and I think in BLM specifically by authority, police or whatever, they were an outlier. They're an extremity, and they shouldn't be. If nothing else, they're not saying we don't want absolutely zero. We don't want the perfect. Just treat us the same as everybody else. If there's some violence, we should all equal the same violence. Or if there's benefit, we should all get the same benefit. I think that's kind of the point. But the way they're putting it, it forces the topic. And if it forces the conversation and topic, it's not necessarily a dumb thing. Just you don't like it. It took me a while to get to that point too. I think at one point when it first came out, I was kind of like anti-BLM, not the stand, the name. Personally, I think I personally was kind of like, Black Lives Matter. That's really a fucked up way to put that. And then after a little just thinking within myself, I'm like, I get it. It took me a minute to think about it and see what they were trying to say. And I get it, and I got it. And I'm like, okay, cool. I get it. Bravo. Good title. Good name. And the message never changed. I never was against the message. It was just that name. His opinion is that it's stupid. That's his opinion, right? And he's entitled to it. Or he doesn't agree with that, and he's doing shock value stuff that he was blaming Eminem for earlier in the song. Who knows? I don't know this guy. Anyway, let's get back to the music.
Censorship's an issue because they choose what they erase. There's a difference between hate speech and speech that you hate. Yep. I think Black Lives Matter was the stupidest name when the system's screwing everyone exactly the same. I just want to spend Thanksgiving Day with food and my family without being accused of celebrating native casualties. We got so divided, it's black and white and political. Republicans are bigots, libtards if you're liberal.
How does spending Thanksgiving with your family mean anything? Right? Like, Thanksgiving is a U.S. specific holiday. I don't know if it exists anywhere else in the world. Right? So it was a U.S. specific holiday to give thanks. Except the events of what got you to that point was not necessarily a good thing. Sitting down on a Sunday and having dinner with your family any day is a good thing. But does celebrating it on Thanksgiving specifically make it special? Because if it does, maybe there's something else you need to address, right? I can sit down with my kids and have a great day, and that's my day of thanks. It doesn't have to be November 25th or whatever day Thanksgiving will fall on. And then pretending that it doesn't come with some negative connotations behind it. I don't know. I don't know if that's a good thing, right? Openly acknowledging the events that occurred to lead to that point, it's not a bad thing, right? Ignoring it is kind of another form of censorship, which you were just talking shit about 30 seconds ago, right? That information should be available, and it should be talked about. You've contradicted yourself a couple of times in this, Mr. Tom MacDonald. I don't know. Maybe you're fake woke yourself.
Thanksgiving Day with food
I don't
and
claim
my
to be
family,
woke.
without being accused of celebrating native casualties. We got so divided, it's black and white and political. Republicans are bigots, libtards if you're liberal. There's riots in our streets and it's just getting worse. Y'all screaming deep on the police, y'all are genius for sure. They're underfunded already, they're way too busy to work. Order food and call the cops, see what reaches you first.
They're overworked because they're doing work they're not supposed to do. Cops are not social workers. Cops are not trained medical staff on how to deal with people with mental disorders. Cops are not the guy who you need to call to rescue your cat when it gets stuck in a tree. Cops are not the people you call when you're being asked to leave a business because you don't meet the business's rules for being in the business. Right? You don't necessarily need to call a cop for any of those activities. But who do you call? The cops. Because there's no one else to call. So it's not that they're too busy and we want to take, they're too busy because people aren't doing the jobs they're supposed to do because we don't fund those jobs. Right? If there were more social workers checking up on the welfare of children, maybe we would have less abuse, which in turn leads to crime and other things and violence down the road. If we had people who were specifically trained on dealing with people with mental disorders when a vet suffering from PTSD has a breakdown in public, instead of having two uniformed officers with badge and gun and handcuffs show up on the scene, even if they're trying to de-escalate, and I'm being very positive saying they are trying to de-escalate, that uniform and that look that they have alone is enough to trigger someone to the point where de-escalation is impossible, right? So defund the police doesn't say get rid of the cops. I am of the opinion that no one with logical thinking would ever say people are not needed to enforce laws. There will always be the need for someone to have to enforce rules and regulations, because if there was no consequences to not following rules and regulations, most people probably wouldn't follow rules and regulations. But cops, maybe a delineation of what they should be doing versus what other people should be doing is the topic of defund the police. You know what? And maybe I'm wrong, but I think if anybody honestly was logically talking about defund the police, turned around and say, well, hey, we could keep funding exactly where it is today for the police. We don't have to take away a dime, but we could find another few $1 million here or there in all these budgets to fund more social workers and legal aid and all of these other things and more healthcare and trained professionals to deal with de-escalation with mental disorders. We could fund all of that and not take away a dime from the cops, and then take away the responsibility of dealing with those situations with those people that we just funded. I don't think anybody would say defund the cops at that point. The problem is there isn't money, right? So people say, well, I can't spend here because I have to give it to the cops. And it's not just the cops. Budgets are tight. Budgets are balancing and fixing and running a country or a city or an office or a team or a company is hard work. Nobody's saying that's easy. But, if the argument is, hey, the budget is not being allocated correctly, we need to look at the budgets and allocate funds appropriately to handle the needs of society. That is what defund the police truly, truly means. But because everybody says, well, I can't take away from here, I can only take away from there and give more here, we're like, hey, you're spending too much on police. We need to take some of that away and spend it elsewhere. And you might see a reduction in these problems. Raise the taxes. Nobody wants to hear that. Raise the taxes, find more money, pay for that. Nobody would say defund the police then. I highly doubt anybody would say defund the police if you took away half of the non-police related work that cops had to do, so they weren't in the situations to get themselves dealing with these things that they don't want to deal with, have people that are more appropriately trained to deal with them. I don't think anybody would complain about budgets anymore at that point. But because the money is locked and fixed, that's where they see where they can take that money from. Because one, the police has been painted in a pretty bad light over the last year or a few years. So like, hey, we're paying all this money and look at what we're getting. Take some of that away and put it Take some of that away and put it over here. Maybe we'll get something better. That's all they're saying. Anyway.
It's in our streets and it's just
I'm definitely not liking the song, Mr.
on
MacDonald.
the police, yell a genius for sure. They're underfunded already, they're way too busy to work. Order food and call the cops, see what reaches you first. Segregation ended, that's a lie in itself. That was a strategy to...
Sorry. Order food and call the police, who gets to you first. The guy who's delivering my food only has one job: to deliver my food. And I'm not trying to talk down on delivery people. That's not my point. But if his only concern is getting from point A to point B, or from point A to B, C, and D in the most effective way and then back, so he can make as many returns, many trips as possible to get paid, that isn't even comparable to dealing with violent crime, non-violent crime, public outbreaks, public, again, like I said, somebody suffering from mental disorder, having an outbreak in public. None of that equals delivering food. So I don't get the comparison. I mean, it sounds funny. It sounds cool. Oh, order a pizza and call the cops, see who gets there first. Why am I calling the cops? Am I calling the cops because another cop got shot? You better believe they're going to be there as fast as possible. Am I calling the cops because my cat's stuck in a tree? Oh, okay. Maybe that's not a priority right now. Am I calling the cops because I'm afraid, because I think my neighbor might be doing something against me? I don't have proof. I just think. Maybe they might not be there. Am I calling the cops because somebody has physically broken into my house and I'm hiding in a closet? They might get there a little sooner. Maybe, right? Those are all theoretical situations. You know, the one thing that is consistent, though? That pizza delivery guy who only has to worry about delivering the pizza and getting there, around traffic, he's going to get there because he's not worried about anything else. He doesn't have priorities. His priorities are getting that pizza there while it's still warm and not dying on the way here, not causing an accident, not getting a ticket, because then he could lose his, his livelihood. Not comparable, Mr. MacDonald. But sounds
genius
cool.
For sure. They're underfunded already. They're way too busy to work. Order food and call the cops. See what reaches you first. Segregation ended, that's a lie in itself. That was a strategy to make us think they were trying to help. They knew that racism was hot if they designed it to sell. We buy every single box and divide us ourselves.
That's true.
So fake woke. Facts don't care about feelings. They know they won't tell me what to believe in. They so fake woke. Same old safe zones. They so fake woke. Facts don't care about your feelings. We use violence to get peace and wonder why it isn't working. That's like sleeping with a football team to try and be a virgin. Politicians are for sale and someone always makes the purchase. But you and I cannot afford it. Our democracy is worthless. If a man has mental illness, call him crazy. Say it silently. When country's going crazy, we accept it as society. Get sick and take a pill. When the side effects get you high, you get addicted like these rappers dying fighting with sobriety. Censoring the facts turns our children into idiots. They claim it's for our safety. I'll tell you what it really is. Removing information that empowers all the citizens. The truth doesn't damage points of view that are legitimate. They're trying to change amen to amen and women. How'd we let them make praying a microaggression? Instead of asking God for the strength to keep winning, we cheat to get ahead and then we ask him for forgiveness. Feminism used to be the most righteous of fights, but these days it feels like they secretly hate guys. I don't trust anyone who bleeds for a week and don't die. I'm just kidding, but everything else that I said is right. They so fake woke. Facts don't care about feelings. They know they won't tell me what to believe in. They so fake woke. Same old safe zones. They so fake woke. Facts don't care about your feelings.
All right. I mean, I'm kind of glad he ended it on a slightly lighter note, or kind of a joke. Kind of? Where he doesn't trust anything that bleeds for 7 days and doesn't die or something. And then he says he was just joking. Like, I'm glad he tried to make it as a joke. He's like, I'm kidding, but everything else I said was right or fact or something. Censorship is a rough topic, right? But having all the points of view available to you and then actually being able to digest all of those points of views and making the right selection, it's not as easy as people just say. Like I said, especially when we can clearly see the wrong choice, or we can see false statements being selected as true, and then that truth being propagated to the point where it's inciting or causing turbulence between just within the society. Like, it's censorship is one of those slippery slopes, right? And I think he stated something about like having all the facts doesn't, having true facts doesn't, uh, having all the facts doesn't take away from the true ones or something like that. And that's 100% not true either. Um, it's just kind of the reason why, and it's unfortunate, but it is one of the reasons why where the U.S. is kind of like a two-party state, because there's so much difference of opinions that if you really went with a multi-party, like 7 different parties, there'd be such a dilution, or the population, the populace would be so diluted, or the members of those parties would be such a diluted number that none of them would truly have a majority. Eventually, I guess there would be a majority, but that singular majority wouldn't represent any majority of the people. And then you would have this weird balance, right? Or this weird rule where most people don't agree with what the government is saying, but they won the vote somehow. Like other countries outside of the US where they have the multi-party and then they can have coalition governments. So like 2 or 3 groups that have difference of opinions but share some similarities can come together and pool their support as a single government. That makes a little bit more sense because now you're having a majority of opinions that a lot of people selected or share being represented through the government. And there's always going to be some conflict and stuff like that. That's inherent. But when you have the two-party system, it's either it's one or the other. So by having all that information out there, but still having the wrong information being propagated, it leads into more of a divisive situation sometimes. So I almost, like I said, feel that was a very Trump specific topic where he's talking about um, the Twitter ban, Trump's Twitter ban, because everything here was so U.S. specific, and how he said something about there's a difference between hate speech and speech that you hate. Yes, I agree. I don't necessarily have to like the speech that was being made public, but when that same sentence or same tweet or same statement is then being used to potentially cause a civil war, yeah, maybe we shouldn't have it floating around in the public space. Just, a possibility. Uh, but it is what it is. I like the song. I like the fact that it's made me take a really long video, so I'm sorry for that. But it's something to at least talk about. It's not just drugs or shake your ass or a hot beat or something. It's a topic of discussion, and that's cool that this leads to that. But I feel like he contradicted himself half the time in his own song. I definitely don't think he's truly woke, and he's calling out fake woke. I don't consider to be woke either, myself to be fully woke. But I think being able to have that conversation is a good thing. So again, good song. It was catchy. It was cool. I like the fact that we can have conversation, but I don't necessarily agree with everything he says, and I don't have to. And he doesn't have to agree with me, right? That's the beauty of having an opinion. I don't hate the guy, and I hope he doesn't have to hate me. I've done nothing to him except making this one video. But just because we have a different opinion doesn't mean I have to, hate each other, or we have to hate each other. And that's the beauty of being able to have intelligent conversation versus just emotional. He said something about like facts, no emotions, or facts don't have feelings, or facts don't have feelings, or something like that. And that's true. If you can stick to facts and take feelings away, you can have conversation. Feelings get involved, and that's when things get really touchy. All right, that's gonna be it. I'm done. Thank you all for still sitting here. If you're here, I'm amazed if you are. Thank you so much. Please hit the like button. Please hit the notify bell. Please subscribe. Check out my other channels. I've got my motovlog and my gaming channel. And check out my Instagram. Link will be up here. Peace, y'all.